Now that the Green Bay Packers released cornerback Jaire Alexander, it's the Chicago Bears that have the best cornerbacks and maybe the best secondary in the NFC North. Plus, another big name Bears fans were interested in is also gone now too.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, I want to look at how the departure of Jaire Alexander shakes up the NFC North and gives the Bears defense, if not just the best cornerbacks, perhaps also the best secondary in the division. I want to hear from Rome Odunze about his development and how not facing Jaire Alexander could help his breakout year 2 season in the making. And then another name gone from the availability for the Chicago Bears as running back Nick Chubb expected to be signed elsewhere and not be the target that a lot of Bears fans were going after. But the Jaire Alexander news struck me as a nice way to kind of poke some fun at the Green Bay Packers and also take stock of where the Bears stand in the division. Because I think when healthy, Alexander was right there in the conversation with Jalen Johnson and Byron Murphy of the Minnesota Vikings as, best cornerback in the NFC North. And I don't know that we've seen Jaire really be that the last couple of seasons because he's been hurt. It's been hard to get like a clear evaluation that, yes, when he's been on the field, he didn't seem as good, but when you miss a bunch of time with injury, then you're not really back in the game shape and haven't been practicing, haven't been developing in that way. And then, of course, then you're hurt again before you can even really get back to where you need to be. So it's been a little while since Jaire has truly been, that Pro Bowl player, 2022 and then back in 2020 before that. But nonetheless, it's a big loss for this Green Bay Packers secondary that we thought for a while they were trying to trade him. Apparently they did try and trade him. Couldn't get a deal. We thought maybe they were going to make it happen, but now he is gone. And I can't help but look around and think, man, the Bears have the best group of cornerbacks. When you add in safeties and call it the secondary as a whole, it becomes, I think, a little bit more open of a debate. But you just look around the NFC North now. First of all, what the Green Bay Packers are left with without Jaire Alexander at cornerback is looks a little rough to me. And I know a lot of Packers fans are saying, well, we didn't have Jaire Alexander for half of last season anyway, and the team was just fine in the secondary. I get that, but you've got the free agent they signed, Nate Hobbs from the Raiders, who's a solid player, but also hasn't played a full healthy season since his rookie year. He plays about 10, 11 games a year, so he may be an injury waiting to happen, like Jaire Alexander was. You got Keyshawn Nixon brought back, who I think was a really solid player for them. And then the only other corner with any experience on that defense is Corey Valentine, who is kind of a backup who has rotated in there with them. Carrington Valentine. They had Corey Valentine was the teammate, but I get them mixed up. Carrington Valentine is the other cornerback for the Packers. They may have their safety, Javon Bullard, come down and play the nickel with Hobbs and Keyshawn Nixon as the outside cornerbacks, but that just doesn't strike me as a group that's prepared to defend wide receiving cores that have DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Luther Burden, or even, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams in Detroit, or Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. Like, that's going to be tough for those guys to keep up with. I think across the NFC North, it's probably the worst of the 4 cornerback rooms, followed by the Detroit Lions at 3 there with Terrion Arnold and DJ Reed, and then we've got Amik Robertson in the slot. Like, I think Terrion Arnold is still an ascending young player who's got some nice moments there, but I don't think of DJ Reed as any kind of major difference maker there, but somebody who can maybe solidify that position coming over from the Detroit Lions, from the New York Jets to the Lions in free agency, but not like a big-time playmaker guy. He has one interception over the last 2 years and 2 in the last 3 years, none in 2024. It's not the best way to measure cornerback play, but it does measure some amount of playmaking ability. Like, I think he's a pretty good cover guy, but maybe just not like the big-time turnover when you absolutely need one type of player. And then Amik Robertson in the slot is kind of, However, he's okay as a number 3 cornerback. To me, it's Minnesota and Chicago that are the 2 best cornerback rooms, and I can hear out Vikings fans who want to say they've got the better cornerbacks here. Like I'm willing to we should give Byron Murphy a lot of credit. He's a really good player. We could even, dare I say, coin toss that with Jalen Johnson. I could kind of hear arguments on both sides. Then they go out and sign Isaiah Rodgers as a free agent from the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think he too can be a nice player for them. I don't know that he's going to be like a Pro Bowl caliber guy, but I think we've seen him play particularly well last year as a rotational guy in Philadelphia, but you're asking him to play a bigger role. Like he was fine with the Colts before that, but a little bit of a smaller type of corner. We'll see exactly how things fit in with him bumping on the outside, if they're going to play Murphy more in the slot in some of those situations. And then Mekhi Becton from Minnesota, I still have some question marks about too, but we have question marks about Tyreek Stevenson in Chicago, right? It's not like the Bears have 3 bona fide studs at corner, but I do think Kyler Gordon as the Bears' second best corner is better than any other team's second best corner right now. And so the combination of Jalen Johnson being a lockdown number 1 guy and Kyler Gordon being a very, very good slot cornerback who the Bears are going to move around and experiment with some positional versatility this season, who could play some more on the outside, could even play some safety. Like this to me is a great cornerback room, certainly compared to the rest of the NFC North, especially if Tyreek Stevenson kind of comes into his own in a scheme that should be a better fit for him, playing a little bit more up closer to the line of scrimmage, some more man coverage in that regard. Like that has the potential to play out, assuming health there is always an important part of this conversation. And that assumption is really important when we talk about evaluating the secondaries as a whole, right? When you add in Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker into the mix, that gives the Bears, one of the better, if not the best, secondary in the NFC North. It's just Brisker's injury history has made it difficult to rely on him. And then if Brisker's not out there, I don't think the Bears can argue for the best cornerback or the best secondary as a whole in this group, because I think the Packers have really good safeties in Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams, the young guy. Like they were one of the best safety duos in football last year. The Lions have 2 really good safeties with Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. Like that gives them a big boost. And even Minnesota, like Harrison Smith is still holding on. He's not what he used to be. Between him and Josh Metellus, they're a pretty decent safety room there. So I think the broader safety debate and broader secondary, including safeties debate, is a lot closer for me than saying I think Johnson, Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson are a better trio than any of the other NFC North teams' trios of corners. The boost that the Lions and Packers get from safety, and that the Vikings certainly do too, that one's a lot more closer. Like I think if Brisker's healthy and plays up to his potential, and if Kevin Byard plays at a high level in Dennis Allen's defense, the Bears can and in theory should have the best secondary in the NFC North. But I think there's just some aspects with Tyreek Stevenson, I need to see it. With Jaquan Brisker, I need to see it in terms of him staying healthy. And then how Kevin Byard fits in the mix too with the new scheme. We just need to see it live that way. I think they have the potential this season to be the best secondary all around. But certainly I think right now they are the best cornerbacks all around. So that means the other secondaries, the other cornerback groups, not the most daunting matchups for this Bears wide receiver core. Byron Murphy not included in this. And I think means that the Packers matchups with the Bears are going to be a lot easier for DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Luther Burden now, without Jaire Alexander being one of those pieces moving around that secondary. And I really think Rome Odunze is primed for a breakout season. We've talked a little bit before about numerically, statistically why that looks right. But we heard from Rome Odunze last week about what he's doing differently this offseason and how much more comfortable he feels. And I want to go through how set he is for success this season next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, whoa, where did all my money go so fast? Between dining out and entertainment, online shopping, it can be easy to lose track. But that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO that gives you visibility and control over all of your finances. I have the Monarch Money app on my phone. I use it all the time because it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Like for me, I used to have it where there's an there's an app on my phone for my credit card, and then there's an app on my phone for my bank account with a debit card, and there's another app for my retirement account, and another app for investments. But with Monarch Money, you can combine them all in one place to track your spending, check your finances, and even plan long-term financial goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first 12 months. So with Jaire Alexander out of the division, clears the way for more production from the other NFC North wide receivers, and I really think we're gearing up for a bigger Rome Odunze season in year 2, despite the drafting of Luther Burden in the second round, who is going to take some targets and catches away from Rome Odunze and Luther Burden. And DJ Moore, but I'm not totally convinced that Luther Burden is going to take more targets than Keenan Allen did last season, right? Like Keenan Allen was getting a lot of playing time and a lot of opportunities in this Bears offense, even if it wasn't necessarily, super productive. But let's not forget Keenan Allen had more targets, catches, and yards and touchdowns than Rome Odunze last season. You take Keenan Allen out and replace him with a rookie, there's going to be some overflow there. The rookie's not just going to take all of Keenan Allen's opportunities. Like, there's going to be more of that to go to somebody like Odunze. And some of it's got to go to Colson Loveland and Cole Clement. And we kind of went through the target share stuff a couple of weeks ago on the Locked On Bears podcast. So if you haven't heard that, go back and take a listen about why, even if Rome Odunze just kind of does the same thing he did last year, that he'll have a much clearer path to 1,000 yards this season. He kind of said 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns is loosely kind of his goal, but he's not super focused on the numbers. It's more about winning and getting the playoffs. But I think one of the things that I'm most encouraged about with Odunze, I guess it's a combination of two things. One, it's year 2 in the NFL and getting his first full offseason as an NFL player. Last offseason, entering the draft, he's working on the combine, he's doing team workouts and pro day stuff. This offseason, he can focus on 100% just making his game better. And then also he's been able to work on his body and add some strength in there as well. So let's hear what Rome Odunze had to say about some of his growth this offseason. And then I want to get into some of the specifics of there's two schools of thoughts here, right? There's the take a big leap in year 2 or hit the sophomore slump. And I want to pinpoint the difference or what makes the difference between those two things. But first, here's Rome Odunze.
With the upper body strength, what areas of your game do you anticipate that helping you with?
I think hand fighting is a big part about it, and there's a lot of nitpicky and kind of grabbing in this league that isn't always shown. That I felt like I needed to build upper body mass to be able to combat some of those things, and 50-50 balls as well. Being able to be physical at the catch point and at the top of routes where, it's not necessarily creating separation through a speed cut, but a nudge or a chicken wing, I feel like was necessary. So that's why I did it.
Well, most guys talk about feeling a lot more comfortable year 2 and starts to slow down. You're nodding your head yes. What's it feel like for you right now?
I feel those things for sure. I think it's a different game than college football. There's different windows, there's different ways to get open, and there's a kind of a different pace that you kind of got to get adapted to. And having a full season under my belt, I feel like I'm aware of those things, and I can now play the game freely in a way, knowing exactly where I need to be when I need to be there. I just need to cater it to this offense and quarterback and chemistry within there.
See, I come away extra encouraged about Rome Odunze there because that upper body strength that he's talking about, being able to be more physical on routes, that to me felt like one of the big weaknesses from his rookie season. Besides just he and Caleb weren't on the same page a lot, and a lot of the targets his way just weren't catchable, accurate balls. The timing was just kind of off. But just physically for Rome himself, he's kind of a slender receiver who could be a little bit more bumped off of his routes by more physical receivers on the other side of him. It's not that he's small per se. I mean, he's 6'3", I think, but just being able to be a little bit stronger on those routes, I think, will go a long way without sacrificing speed in the process. And I think that primes him for more of a year 2 jump than a potential sophomore slump. And I think a lot of times in the NFL, when we see a player take a step back in year 2 and have that true sophomore slump, it's usually the culprit of, in the NFL, other teams watch your tape too, and they pick up on your tendencies, the things you do well and the things you do poorly. And that if you go from year 1 into year 2, just trying to kind of do more of the same of what you've done in the past, they will figure you out, and you have to come up with new ways to get open, to run those routes, to create separation. Like you mentioned, the chicken wing, the elbow, little nudges here and there. Like if he's got like a go-to move, cornerbacks will see that and be ready to counter that, and then he won't create the separation. But like his recognition of needing to do that and then finding ways to do that suggests that he's staying one step ahead. Like I think rookies have a really great rookie year, and then they don't think that they need to keep working ahead on it as much, and then defenses catch up, and then they hit that wall, and then middle of the season they're trying to figure out new ways to do stuff, but you're already in the season, and it's hard to do that. But in order to like stay ahead and have that year 2 jump, right, you take what you did in year 1, and then you add to it, you push it further, you put new things in there and on top of that, so that defenses are still trying to adapt to that over the course of the season. Like you always have to try and stay a step ahead with what you do and how well you do it. And it feels to me like everything is lining up for Rome Odunze to be able to do that in this offense, especially when you add in, a new receiving coach like Antoine Randall L that can offer him different tips and pointers and instructions, a different set of eyes on Odunze's game compared to the coaching staff last season. It's not to say like he wasn't getting good coaching from the wide receivers coach, but it's just a different person will see it differently and want to emphasize different things or suggest different things or have new and unique ideas for how Odunze can do things better. So like there's this give and take between, it's year 1 of Ben Johnson's offense, so we can't expect him to be perfect and absolutely dominate. And at the same time, boy, you can really see the potential for things to take off for somebody like Odunze. Like I don't think he's going to necessarily surpass DJ Moore as the Bears' number 1 receiver, but I do think in the long term, this front office and this coaching staff is watching to see like not this year, we're not making decisions in 2025, but like 2 or 3 years from now, as Rome Odunze gets towards the end of his rookie contract, and Luther Burden's a couple years in his contract, the Bears are going to be looking at this and saying, okay, do you keep DJ Moore long term? You do short term for sure. He's here this year. He's here next year. Like he's around for a little while. But as eventually, you start to get pie in the sky thinking in the future, if Odunze and Burden both look like solid number 1, number 2 receivers in the NFL, that can be the difference between somebody like DJ Moore sticking around in the long term versus the Bears saying, hey, we've got younger alternative options here that we drafted and we developed and we'd prefer to go to that way. So that's the seeds of that all start to get planted this season. Not that you need the finished product this season, but you start to see that progress and that turnaround and that growth from this aspect of the Bears offense. Plus you add in that you're not really going to be able to double team any of these guys because you've got so many different weapons between Loveland and Kmet and Burden and Odunze and Moore. And then, DeAndre Swift catching passes out of the backfield, Roshan Johnson, Kyle Monungai rotating in that running back rotation. And as it stands right now, it doesn't seem like anything's going to be added to that Bears backfield. The Bears don't seem to be particularly interested in doing so, and they are running out of options to be able to do so because the man that Bears fans haven't been able to stop talking about without any real evidence behind it, Nick Chubb, is heading elsewhere to the Houston Texans, officially signing a 1-year deal. So we'll take a look at what that means for this Bears backfield, what other options they might have, and whether or not they're just fine with rolling with the guys they have right now. Next on Locked On Bears. The Bears were never really going to sign Nick Chubb, at least not anytime immediately soon. But if you read Bears fans posting on social media, you would think Nick Chubb was sitting in O'Hare Airport waiting for the Chicago Bears to hand him the contract that he could sign. Like there were endless posts of speculation about Chubb potentially coming here, and there were made up reports that were never real that he was going to visit Hallis Hall and have a workout with the Bears. Workouts with free agents are reported to the league and go out on the league's transaction wire. He never had a workout visit with the Chicago Bears at Hallis Hall. And then you had, I think it was a Cleveland area or some Ohio area radio host claiming the Bears were zeroing in on him and really interested in signing him. And none of that ever had any legs or came to any kind of fruition as Chubb signs with the Houston Texans. The Bears have had all offseason to sign Nick Chubb if they wanted to. They could have signed him before the draft. They could have signed him right after the draft. They could have signed him after rookie minicamp. They could have signed him after OTAs. Even mandatory minicamp was completely said and done. And then we went through a whole weekend, and then we get to Monday, and Nick Chubb signs with the Houston Texans, right? It's not as though the Texans snagged him from the Bears before they had a shot to go get him. Like the Bears wanted to sign Nick Chubb, they would have done it already. Or they at least would have brought Nick Chubb in on a workout. There just was never any real legs to the Nick Chubb thing, and yet it was talked about over and over again. Like it was this sort of like self-created rumor that was never actually substantiated in any way, shape, or form. It was low-hanging fruit to make up fake news about a free agent that is at a position that Bears fans want to see the team addressed. But I think we've seen and heard Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles at multiple stops say, like, we're rolling with this backfield. Like, we're always evaluating. We're always interested in upgrades, but, like, this is the group. They drafted Monarch. They had a plan to draft a running back. They got one, not until the 7th round, but I think they really like those guys. Plus, Travis Homer has been a special teams guy and a backup in the NFL for a long time. You got undrafted free agent Ian Wheeler from last season, who showed some flashes in the preseason before he got hurt. And then they did add an undrafted rookie free agent running back from Texas State in Deion Hankins. I don't think Hankins or Wheeler really have a shot at the 53-man roster, but the point being is, like, the Bears have running backs here. They've got depth on this roster, and I think they really do believe in Roschon Johnson and Kyle Monungai. Like, we should have assumed this was the case even after mandatory minicamp when Ben Johnson singled out Kyle Monungai as one of the standouts at minicamp, someone who's gotten a lot better from the first practice to the last practice that he had been there for. I think they're thoroughly impressed with the backs in the backfield. He's worked with DeAndre Swift before. He knows what he can do. He's seeing Roschon Johnson and Kyle Monungai grow in this offense. I think they have a pretty good sense of, like, there are guys here that we like, and if they want to add another running back, there are other free agent options available, but I don't think they're in this position where it's like, it's not a question of, do we want to add a new number one running back? It's just a matter of, is there anybody else we would want to add into the rotation as potential depth? But they're not looking for a Nick Chubb to come in, be the starter, and rush for 1,000 yards. They're content with DeAndre Swift in that role. They have had opportunities to get a different player in there if they had wanted to, and they decided not to. So to me, it's not a question of, like, do they go out and get Nick Chubb, or, you know, all this talk about trading for, like, Kenneth Walker from the Seattle Seahawks, or now James Cook from the Buffalo Bills is the latest running back trade speculation for the Bears. And it's like, why do you think the Bears, like, what makes you think the Bears would give up draft picks right now to add a running back via trade? And specifically in some of these cases, a running back that needs a new contract. So you're giving up a draft pick and a contract for a running back when you could have just given up a contract for a running back in free agency and just signed one without having to trade anything for him. Or you could have just used a draft pick on a running back in the draft and taken one in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th round before in the 7th. Like, if the Bears really wanted to address running back in a meaningful way, they would have already. They've had ample opportunity. So I just never believed that they're going to go out and sign Nick Chubb to be a significant running back addition. I think I'd put J.K. Dobbins from the Chargers in the same conversation. They're not going to go out and give a above minimum contract to a running back. Now, could they sign a veteran to be a depth player in the number 3 type of role? Like, I point out Jamal Williams from the New Orleans Saints, I think would make a lot of sense. He's 30 years old, but played in the Saints offense. So Dennis Allen knows him. He obviously played for the Lions before that. So Ben Johnson knows him. There's a lot of connections here. He would be cheap, veteran minimum player who comes in as a backup, not guaranteed anything on the roster, but then he's competing with Roschon and Kyle Monungai. Like, that type of move I could see, but it would be someone who comes in more towards the middle or bottom of the running back depth chart, not someone who gets thrown in at the top there. I mean, and maybe at the very minimum, you trade a 7th round pick for a backup running back from somewhere else. Like I mentioned, Antonio Gibson from the New England Patriots, who's got a connection to Eric Bieniemy. Like, sure, but like 7th round pick at most type of trade where it's a throwaway type deal. I just don't think the Bears see this as a priority need. Like, when I look at this Bears roster and think about where between now and training camp they might want to address a position in free agency, I think the absolute top of the list is at defensive end, where behind Montez Sweat and Dio Dengbo, you've got Dominique Robinson and Austin Booker. And we've talked about them a decent amount on this podcast. Like, both young, developing players that you hope can become more than what we've seen so far, but neither one is like a proven number 3 defensive end rotational pass rusher who should be playing a lot of snaps in this defense right now. Like, there's a hole there in my eyes that needs to be filled, and there's still veteran free agent pass rushers available, namely like Zadarius Smith, who played for Ben Johnson and the Lions last season. But even like somebody like Von Miller is still out there. The Bears are not going to sign Von Miller. But the point being, there's some other pass rushers out there that could really give you a nice number 3 pass rusher upgrade. And then I also think we can't rule out a safety being brought in to be behind Brisker and Kevin Byard. We've seen Dennis Allen like to use packages with 3 safeties in them. I'm guessing plan A right now is Kyler Gordon playing in that 3rd safety spot and kind of moving all over this Bears secondary. But I think there's a number of former Saints safeties that played in Dennis Allen's defense still out on the open market, like Marcus Williams and Marcus May, I think, and there's a couple. There's Von Bell was out there too. Like, there's a few different former Saints safeties that are sitting there in free agency that know this defense, could come in, plug and play. You're not going to pay them like a starter. You're not going to bench Brisker or Kevin Byard, but just have somebody else in here that has some experience. And then also, if Jaquan Brisker gets hurt again, you've got an option there that you feel like is better safety depth than Jonathan Owens and Elijah Hicks, who are fine special teams players, but there's not a 3rd safety on this roster right now that I would feel super comfortable with having to start multiple games in my defense next season. I think it's a big weakness if Hicks or Owens is a starter in your defense due to injuries because of everything else there. So it just feels to me like running back is at best 3rd fiddle there. I mean, I'd even like more interior offensive line depth with Ryan Bates and Doug Kramer and Luke Newman as your top backups there. Like maybe running back is 4th on the priority list of like spots to add more talent. I get it. It's not the best backfield in the NFL. There are a lot of other better running back backfields. I also think they're not the worst backfield in the NFL either. I think there's 3 or 4 or 5 that are for sure worse, and then probably another 5 or 6 that are arguably worse. I do want to take some time on the podcast at some point this offseason here and kind of compare where this Bears backfield is now compared to other backfields and why that I think makes it easier to absorb not being able to sign someone like Nick Chubb. Maybe we'll do that this week on the podcast with the Chubb signing still fresh here. We'll see kind of how the week plays out because right now we're not doing currently a full 5 days a week Locked On Bears schedule. We're in the slow part of the offseason, so we're just going to be coming to you 3 days a week. Been trying to stick to a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday publishing schedule to kind of have some consistency for it every single week. But as there's big Bears breaking news along the way, certainly we'll be able to pop back in for a regular podcast. And then once we get closer to training camp or get to training camp at the end of July, then we'll ramp back up to a full 5 days a week here on Locked On Bears. So that's why you have to make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, because I co-host Locked On NFL every Tuesday morning with Tyler Rowland. The podcast comes out twice a day, but I co-host Tuesday mornings. We talked about Jaire Alexander being released by the Green Bay Packers. We talked about the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation and Shedeur Sanders. And then we talked about the Indianapolis Colts situation with Anthony Richardson hurt and Daniel Jones in that competition there. A lot of messes on some other teams here. And it's really nice to not have the Bears be in any of those kind of messes at this stage of the offseason. But go make Locked On NFL your second listen today. Coming back on Thursday and make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.